It is 10 a.m. in New York, 7 a.m. in Los Angeles, where a pro-Palestinian encampment came under attack by counter-protesters on the UCLA campus overnight. The rival groups were using pepper spray and throwing barricades and fireworks into the crowd. And in New York City, police stormed Columbia University's campus and arrested dozens of pro-Palestinian demonstrators occupying the Hamilton Hall building. We have team coverage of this story on both coasts this morning.
Let's start with Carter Evans, who's following the developments in Los Angeles. Carter, good morning. I see what is left of the compound, I guess. We saw some really crazy video from overnight. What's the situation like there now? Is there still a police presence in the area?
Yeah, we've still got a pretty big police presence here right now. I was just trying to do a rough count, probably about 100 officers around the quad that I can see here right now. But they are very calm. Things have calmed down here quite a bit from overnight. This is the pro-Palestinian encampment here, and you can see what they've done here is they've kind of used railings and plywood and whatever they can find to build up a barricade here to keep people out. And that's what counter-protesters were fighting against last night. Now, from what it sounded like when I was here, it sounded like they were pro-Israeli counter-protesters, but their goal was, in effect, to break down this barrier. So there were some very tense moments as the two sides clashed, and the counter-protesters were trying to tear apart this barrier. But eventually, police moved in and cleared out the counter-protesters. This encampment, though, is still here. Police still here. This encampment is considered illegal at this point. They've been told to vacate, so we're kind of waiting to see what happens next.
So, in Columbia, they sort of very quickly try to keep non-students off the campus. I'm kind of curious about how things unfolded where you are. Why did they have the protesters and counter-protesters so close together? How did it sort of explode?
Yeah, so I had not been inside the encampment yet, but I'm told it's mostly students in there, but I could not tell you if there are non-students in there as well. Outside, on the other side, the counter-protesters, there were a lot of non-students here, or at least a lot of people who looked like non-students. And there were also some outside agitators that clearly just were here for the fight, and they didn't have a side or a dog in the fight here, if you will, but they were here for the action with police, and they were trying to instigate police. But eventually, police were able to very, very calmly bring it all under control.
And have you talked to students? This is the time of year where you're wrapping up the year. You're thinking about your last few assignments, maybe exams, maybe graduation, which I don't think is going to happen for them. What are they saying?
Yeah, well, right now, at least the people here that I've been speaking to are not planning on leaving anytime soon, or at least not until they get what they're asking for from the university, which is divestment in Israel. And they say they're going to stay here for as long as it takes. Now, we'll see if something similar happens here, like happened in Columbia. This has been declared unlawful, as I said. So the framework is being set up to remove this encampment. We'll just have to see if and when that happens.
All right, Carter Evans, thank you so much. All right, now we're going to head on over to New York City. That's where Lilia Luciano is, just outside of Columbia University. How things have changed overnight. Lilia, good morning.
Good morning, Anne-Marie. Well, more than 200 people were arrested in New York between Columbia University and the City College of New York campus, which is a CUNY college there. We were there when police finally broke into the gates of that campus at CUNY, arrested many people. I mean, we're talking now about 200 people or more. A lot of them have been released over the morning, but what we witnessed was students and other protesters being taken out of this area at Columbia and over there. Some were let to just go back and leave the area of the campus. And those who resisted, of course, were arrested. And besides that, what struck me, too, was seeing how many of the protesters outside of the universities and outside of the police perimeter were chanting and cheering them on. Here's our story, and I'll come back with more details. Dozens of NYPD officers in riot gear entered Columbia University around 9 p.m., some through locked gates, others seen here coming through a second-floor window of the building occupied by demonstrators Tuesday night. The officers entered Hamilton Hall at the request of the university. While inside, police cleared barricades, conducted multiple arrests, eventually clearing the building. Police also began clearing the tent encampment that had been the symbol of the protest on campus for nearly 2 weeks. Then NYPD moved further north in Harlem towards the City College campus. We were there when dozens of officers breached a gate to clear the encampment and began arresting protesters. Dozens more students were loaded onto city buses and detained by the end of the night. Many faculty members were outside, like this professor we spoke to, who was visibly upset over seeing so many students handcuffed.
I'm just devastated that this is happening to every single campus in this country. We're letting the military in, we're letting the police in. These are just students.
At a press conference before police arrived at the college campuses, Mayor Eric Adams blamed outside agitators for the chaos and urged student protesters to call it quits.
We cannot and will not allow what should be a peaceful gathering to turn into a violent spectacle that serves no purpose.
Wesleyan University President Michael Roth says he has not cleared the encampments at his campus, but he thinks students' efforts should be on legislators instead.
It's the White House that can make a difference on the ground in Gaza and in Israel. And so I think getting our political energies pointed in the right direction could be very powerful.
There's been some outrage and some celebration along the streets around Columbia. People who live here saying, look, this needed to happen. We've heard from faculty from here in CUNY who say, and wonder how much police is too much police and how disturbing it was for them to see police officers in riot gear going into campuses and removing these encampments and removing the protesters from the occupied buildings. And, one conversation that I had with the president of Wesleyan was around how effective is it, as you heard in the story, for students to demand divestment as opposed to going to, for instance, their lawmakers to protest who have more power over stopping the war and achieving that ceasefire or funding Israel. And so, that part of the conversation, I brought it to the campus and tried to talk to some students who were telling us, look, this could seem like a distraction. We definitely have the eyes of the world right now on us, but we also want to make sure that everyone understands that this is not about us. We're here in solidarity with the suffering in Gaza, and any consequence to the students and other protesters pales in comparison. So it's obviously, as it has been from the beginning, a very tricky debate, and oftentimes not even a debate, just screaming matches.
Well, as you know, there are similar protests happening across the country. The pressure on these universities, including Columbia, to divest is not likely to go away. What is the University of Columbia planning on doing moving forward, either with the possibility of continued protest or the idea of divesting? Have they spoken about any of it?
Well, there had been negotiations conversations between the university and organizers of the protest, part of those that are within the student body. And last week they said, look, we reached an impasse, and that's why they said we're going to remove the students. That's why they called NYPD for the second time, and that's how we got here. Now NYPD is going to remain in the university until May 17th. Commencement is on May 15th, so they're doing that in order to avoid any other encampments or buildings from being occupied. The university also said that the students who were inside Hamilton Hall are facing expulsion. So it seems like nowhere near what the students wanted. And the university had said after they reached that impasse that they're not divesting. And so what's happening from here until commencement, it looks like this: barricaded, police presence, and protests, I'm sure, will continue in campuses across the country and perhaps in the streets of New York, but I don't think inside Columbia.
All right, Lilia, thank you very much.